Today, Africans are celebrating African Integration Day, a time called by the African Union to recognize major achievements and advance meaningful solutions towards the region's full integration of the world's largest free trade area. On this special occasion, I welcome you to this historic Boma on bringing the world together in a time of crisis, hosted by the African Union and AfroChampions. Depending on your age and location, you might be asking, what is a Boma? And why is this discussion of historic significance? Bomas, in fact, originated in parts of Africa during the pre-colonial era. A Boma is literally a community enclosure, an enclosure that was originally used to protect livestock from predators. These bomas quickly emerged as gathering places where the elders and communities would sit under the African sky around a lit fire and discuss strategies and discuss solutions and engage in storytelling. Today's Boma indeed finds the world and Africa at a strategic inflection point, the crossroads of a triple crisis: COVID, climate, and Ukraine. Many consider Africa a collateral victim of these external shocks, while some others say that these disruptions provide the impetus for Africa to rise up as a major power in its own right and no longer act as a collection of mostly small, weak, and easily divisible statelets. There's broad recognition that with 60% of the world's arable land, Africa has the potential to feed itself and indeed the entire world. A key lesson from COVID has taught us and the region that we cannot be overly dependent in Africa on external aid, and we certainly should not pin our hopes on the charity of strangers and others. What we know for sure is that the world is headed to an historic inflection point, a point at which things will have to be done differently. A point of change similar to the last great inflection point, and that is the inflection point after World War II. I really, truly hope that it will not take a greater cataclysm than what we are now experiencing to realize that we need to embark on a course correction and build stronger international engagement and more fortified global and regional institutions where no region and no people are left behind. Where should Africa sit and stand in this new world order? If we ever needed a Boma, we need it now. As one emerging from Africa's 6th region, I am so honored to be here to look at the role that Africa could play in bringing the world together in this time of crisis. Madam Secretary Hillary Clinton, thank you so much for joining us today. For our global audiences and audiences across Africa, we have with us a global leader of rare distinction, a friend of Africa who is among the top most influential and positively impactful forces of our century. And that is the former Secretary of State from the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton. She is respected throughout the world for both her foreign and domestic policy expertise and insights. She has been an architect and advocate of institutions that anchor global stability and prosperity. She has been a friend and champion of African nations, one who has delivered tangible benefits across the continent, from trade, aid, healthcare, women's empowerment, you name it, the secretary has been there. She is savvy, patient, and a master of the high art of diplomacy. At last, but by no means least, she has been an inspiration and an example, role model to so many women, including me. So many women and girls throughout the world, Madam Secretary, appreciate you, and we can't thank you enough. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this Africa Century discussion.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And it is a personal pleasure and privilege to be here with you. And to all those who are watching, Your Excellencies and honorable ministers and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply grateful to be part of this year's Boma. As we come together to recognize and celebrate Africa's Integration Day, I think we're also called to reflect on the progress that has been made toward achieving a future that is defined by growth and good governance, on the success of global alliances and private-public partnerships, and what will define a 21st century Africa. I think there is a lot to celebrate. You know, since 2000 and the Africa Growth and Economic Opportunity Act, trade between Africa and the rest of the world has more than tripled. Private investments have far surpassed official aid. We've seen on the social indicators, child mortality rates decreasing, primary school enrollment increasing. And last year, capital investments in Africa's tech ecosystem hit record highs. So there is a lot that we can look at and feel very good about. But as you know better than I, for all the progress that has been made, enormous challenges around the world, but focusing just on Africa remain. The prolonged COVID-19 epidemic, the prospect of uneven economic growth following that pandemic, climate change, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there continue to be devastating effects on the continent, many of which are not of Africa's making at all, but the consequences of which Africa has to contend with. So throughout my career, as Rosa said, I have been a staunch champion of Africa's growth, prosperity, equity, justice, opportunity. And it's really important for young people. And as you know, Africa has the youngest, fastest growing population in the world. That's a blessing, but it's also a challenge. And how do we meet the expectations, the aspirations, the needs of Africa's young people? I'm delighted to be in conversation today with Rosa Whitaker, a brilliant and visionary policy expert, career diplomat, and trade negotiator. And I remember very well when she was in on the ground floor when my husband was working with the Congress, led by then Congressman Charles Rangel, to open the doors for greater trade with Africa. So Rosa, let's dive right in.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. You know, Africa is at the threshold of implementing the largest free trade area in the world, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement with 1.3 billion people, $3.4 trillion in GDP expected. What advice would you give African countries as they try to position themselves to navigate globally? You've had such a tremendous record in forging global alliances.
Well, Rosa, first, I'm thrilled to hear that there is such a negotiation ongoing and the real promise of what an open market in Africa itself would mean for African nations, and most particularly the African people. So clearly, I support those continuing efforts and look forward to hearing about the final resolution. But I would offer 3 points in answer to your question. I think each nation should take a hard look at itself. What are your strengths and your weaknesses, your problems? How are you going to capitalize on your strengths and shore up your weaknesses? For example, we know we need to do a better job providing cold storage and market access for the millions of small farmers on the African continent. Because if we do, and we can then create collective opportunities for those smallholder farmers to join together to be part of the greater African economy, that will be good from the ground up in many countries. So take a hard look, be really honest about it. And secondly, think about who the losers will be. Try to mitigate against that. This is a lesson that I offer from our own experience in the United States, which has been involved in many free trade agreements, and it has caused a backlash because people have said, wait a minute, it may be fine for certain sectors like high tech or other information economy kinds of jobs, but what about us? What about those whose jobs are being exported and lost? Yeah. So I think it's important for African nations to say, what are we going to do for those people who can't compete in the African economy or the global economy? How do we improve skills? How do we provide better inputs? How do we create more opportunity for them? Because if you increase inequity in a bid to try to create greater equity, you're going to have some consequences that can cause unrest and social instability and greater economic inequality. So please look at that. And then finally, in order to have the maximum benefit from what this trade agreement within Africa can present, you really do have to have good governance. It will do no good to have a free trade agreement on paper if you have border guards who are demanding bribes before trucks can pass, if you have government officials who are taking kickbacks or otherwise engaged in corruption, so that you add cost to what should be a much lower cost opportunity within the continent. So governments who want to see their whole nation's GDP increase, who want to see greater economic opportunity for people who have been left out or left behind, pay attention to governance and do everything you can to stamp out corruption, because we don't want a situation where you have on paper greater trade, but individuals can't break into that system because the obstacles, including corruption, are too great for them to participate. So the upside is dramatic, but the challenges need to be addressed.
And that is a very, very important counsel, and you are absolutely right. Madam Secretary, many of us talked in the U.S. about that historic milestone you achieved when you got 18 million more votes than the eventual president of the U.S. in 2016, making you the highest female presidential vote getter, not only in U.S. history, but global history. And I remember African women saying across the continent that there were, in fact, far more than 18 million cracks in that glass ceiling because you provided them with unquantifiable hope and instruction in public service and leadership. So for the women across Africa, many of whom are still pushing and working and looking to you for inspiration, and so many look to you for inspiration, what advice would you give them right now in this moment of crisis and opportunity?
Well, I like the way you asked that question, Rosa, because it is a moment of crisis and opportunity. And I'm well aware that the pandemic had a disproportionately negative impact on women and girls across the world, including in Africa. And so many people are still unsettled and uncertain about the path forward. But to the women of Africa, who are, in my view, among the most inspiring and strong people on our planet, there is a bigger role for you to play in the economy and in society, in your political system, because of this time. I have seen how the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act has ignited small businesses in Africa. I'm wearing a dress from the firm Zuri, based in Kenya, and I have, I don't know, about 7 or 8 of them, and many different patterns. I didn't wear one of the pattern ones because that makes the TV kind of go a little crazy, but I think it's important to do everything we can to provide those economic channels for women on the continent, and a free trade agreement, greater investment in women, greater opportunity, removing all the obstacles that nations put in the way for women to have access to credit, to be absolutely on an equal economic footing as men, will go a long way. In politics, I would love to see more women in government in Africa. My longtime friend, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, is running a program about African women's leadership out of her center in Liberia. And I would love to see many, many more such programs for women throughout the continent. How do you qualify to serve in government? How do you qualify to be selected by a political party to run for office? How do you wage an election? These are all skills that in the past, women have not been given the opportunity to develop. So I'm very excited about what this century holds, and really even just the next decade, on behalf of the women in Africa. And the final word is about the girls of Africa. Everything must be done to ensure their education as far as their hard work and talent will take them. We have to do what we can to prevent child marriage, which ends the education and opportunities for, bright, hardworking girls and young women. We have to make sure healthcare and all of its aspects is available for girls. So I think we need to focus on how our girls are faring and what more needs to be done to help them, and then open the doors more widely, especially to young women, but really women of all ages.
Well, Madam Secretary, I will never forget your pioneering work on empowering women. I remember traveling with you and promoting the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and your encouragement and your tangible support. I just have one final question. You talk to people all around the world, and so many look up to you. How do you remain so hopeful? You're always hopeful. What gives you hope?
Rosa, I work at it because, as we all know, life is not a straight line with only, happy days. We all face challenges and setbacks and disappointments. That's just part of being a human being. But I was blessed with parents, particularly my mother, who instilled in me a sense of resilience. She had a tough life herself, came from a neglectful, abusive family, was out on her own working at the age of 13 in another family's home. But that family, the mother of that family, let her continue to go to school, which was a great gift. But my mother, given all of the hardship that she faced as a young child and teenager, really basically told me, everybody gets knocked down. The question is, are you going to get back up? So yes, I've been knocked down, as many know, but my view on this is you have one life. You have this amazing gift of life, no matter who you are and where you are. Nobody can make you feel bad or inferior about yourself without your permission. So take criticism seriously if there's really something to be learned, but don't take it personally, because so many of the critics don't have your best interests at heart. They have their own agenda. And when you remember that, and when you feel like you're living with a purpose, whether it's on behalf of your family, your community, your country, your profession, your faith, whatever it might be that motivates you, you can keep yourself going. And I often think about one of our great women in American history, Harriet Tubman, the slave who escaped in early 19th century America from the plantation on which she and her family were enslaved. And instead of moving forward and not looking back, she made a new life for herself, but she went back time and time again to rescue other slaves, first her family, and then others who were her acquaintances, to bring them to freedom. And the story is that when she would gather up these slaves on their path to freedom, she would say to them, don't stop, keep going. If you hear the dogs behind you, keep going. If you hear gunshots, keep going all the way to freedom. Well, today we have to keep going, Rosa. I mean, we have a lot of big problems in the world. We have wars, we have climate change with all of its terrible impacts of drought and floods and everything else we're suffering. We have to keep going. And so it starts in the family to help build up children's sense of resilience and purpose. And then it needs to spread into the community and beyond. So I guess I like to describe myself as an optimist who worries a lot.
Oh my goodness. Well, I would say that you are a fount of hope, and now more than ever, we need your voice, we need your ideas, we need your solutions, and the beneficiaries of your impact are truly immeasurable. And I just wish, and I can speak on behalf of so many across Africa who talk to me, we just wish you continued strength and success. Thank you so much for joining us on this special occasion.
Thank you. It was a great honor, Rosa.
Thank you so much.